All right, we are live. Welcome to another HDPR Live. I'm your host, Jamie Irvine. Today we have Scott Boltz joining us on the show. Scott, welcome to HDPR Live. Thanks for being here.
Jamie, thanks for having me.
So you're the Vice President of Commercial Diesel Products at Global Diesel Emissions. And today we're going to talk about DPFs and DOCs, specifically how to sell them. I kind of want to come at this from a couple perspectives. One, how do we sell it? The other, if you're buying, what information do you need to know? So my first question is, before we really get into that, can you give us a quick history lesson about how Aftertreatment kind of got to where it is today? And really specifically, I want to talk about how Aftertreatment has become one of the largest line items on their cost for fleets. Like, how did we get here?
No, absolutely. First, one correction. I work for Global Emission Systems Incorporated.
Sorry, I knew that didn't sound right. I must have had a typo.
Affectionately known as Jesse. So
there we go.
Internally, we call it Jesse.
Yeah.
So yeah, the story about emissions really goes back about 25 years. The EPA started in the 70s with gasoline engines, and then really in the mid 90s, they started really looking at the diesel side. And obviously, because of the volume of trucks and the amount of miles that they cover, it was significant. And so it really started with low sulfur diesel fuel, or ultra low, ULSD, what do they call it? ULSD, right? And so what that was going after was really a reduction in NOx gases. And so that was really the first tier, the first start. And then in the year 2000, the EPA basically told the OE manufacturers, we're not going to tell you what to do. We're going to tell you what you need to hit. So they started with NOx gases and with particulate matter. And so they had to hit those numbers in a period of 10 years. So in 2004, we saw the addition of EGR. And so the EGR coolers and everything else involved in that system sought to bring in exhaust gas into the combustion chamber in order to reduce NOx gas. And that achieved about a 38% reduction in NOx. So that was a good start. And then in 2007, we saw the advent of the DPF and the DOC. And those are two elements that work together, a catalyst and a filter that work together to trap particulate matter and then bake that matter down into an ash instead of a soot, because the volume of the soot is considerably larger than the volume of the ash. So then we have 2004 with the EGR, we have 2007 with the DPF and the DOC. And then in 2010, we see the advent of the SCR. And the SCR, its sole purpose in the world is to reduce the amount of NOx gases. And so the target point was 0.2 grams of NOx gases per horsepower hour, and then 0.01 grams per horsepower hour of particulate matter. And so that really brings us to the point where in 2010, the EPA shifted gears, and then they started to really focus on things relating to other greenhouse gases, GHGs. And those GHGs they're going after right now are carbon dioxide. And the way that they're working with the OEMs to really reduce that is to go after friction and go after, so right now the focus with the EPA isn't on emissions. It's really more focused on aerodynamics, fuel economy, things like that. And so that's going to change in 2027. So should we talk about that now?
Yeah, I was going to ask you because I had heard that basically from 2020 to 2027, there's another big milestone that has to be hit. So fill us in on that.
Well, I can only tell you what my understanding of the EPA and the government is. So there's a lot of, it's limited, right? There's a lot of effort right now to look at 2027 as the next stage for emissions. And there's only really, right now, if you look at the EPA documents and you look at the website of the federal government seeking input from the trucking industry, from the ATA, from the TMC, from other organizations and other lobbying groups, they're really looking for input on what is it that we can do, because I think it's very clear and we can all agree that the emissions imposed upon the trucking industry in the 2000s were significant. And it speaks to what you're talking about in costs per mile. I'm a fan of your podcast. And I love that I also do the same thing. I really focus my business around cost per mile. And so tires used to be the #1 cost to the fleet. And it was well known and well documented. And then emissions emerged, and now it has taken the #1 spot. And so the way that we're going to reduce cost over time is really to focus on improvements in the system. And that's where 2027 comes into play. So there's talk about adding an SCR at the turbo. So we're going to put an SCR in front of a DPF and DOC after an SCR. But that's really the only technology kind of focus that the EPA has right now. Now, I fully expect that that will change depending on politics and regulation and so many other things. But they're also looking at improving the catalyst materials and then improving the PGM loadings. And if it's not PGM, then what, right? And then the last thing that they're looking at for 2027 is really exhaust insulation. And so this is going to be a general theme in our conversation if we're going to talk about after treatment is really, we have to get away from looking at the DPF and the DOC and the SCR as like either the problem or the cost, right? Because typically what happens is it's everything upstream. Everything from the exhaust manifold, including the EGR cooler and the turbo. There's so many things in that system, including sensors, that really affect the livelihood of the after treatment system itself.
That makes a lot of sense. So let's talk about this from the perspective of selling these products. So if an insurance person isn't selling insurance, they're selling peace of mind. What are we selling when we sell these after treatment products?
Well, we're really selling uptime. Cost per mile and uptime is where our business is focused. And what I mean by that is, and I'm speaking directly to the outside parts salesperson for the distributor, whether that's an OES dealer, whether that's a cleaner, whether that's an independent, whether that's a member of a buying group. So how do they succeed, right? And the answer is different for each one of them, by the way. The OES parts dealers have a captive back counter, right? Where trucks of that name brand come in for service and they can do it there. The independents have a different challenge, really, because they're trying to address the fleet at the fleet level. So I think there's a bigger conversation that we can have around really economics. And so it's my opinion that over the last 20 years, we've seen a great degree of consolidation. So the idea of like a mom and pop kind of dealership is almost gone. There are all these big behemoths now. They have hundreds of locations across the country, or tens or dozens, right? And so, you know, this consolidation happening is also happening at the fleet level. You know, the owner operator used to be a greater percentage of the amount of drivers than it is today. And if you can look at the OIDA statistics on that, you know, like the owner operator is facing different challenges. And I think the things that are happening currently in our economy and the things that are occurring relative to COVID and everything else that are going on, the reduction of our consumption, the demand destruction that's also happening demographically through the boomers, we're going to see a change in our industry, and it's relevant and important to understand. And so to answer your question, I'm sorry if I'm talking too much about this, really is how do we help the independents? Like I said, there's all these different categories. How do we help them sell these products better? And really the answer is, and it's something that I feel very passionately about, is that we have to help them understand the upstream problems right away. Because if we can solve those upstream problems, then they don't need to buy these expensive components as often.
That makes a lot of sense. And, you know, when you talk about consolidation, I see that on the parts side too. You know, the independent owners, they're either part of a buying group or they're getting bought up. Or they're being pushed out. So that's happening too. And I think that's how we got to a place. I mean, it makes sense to me with after treatment at the beginning, let's say like 2010 to 2020, that first 10 years after that milestone, why the dealers have like 90% of that market share. So let's kind of focus on the independent then. If you are an independent and you are selling parts, how can you capture more market share?
Well, really, again, it's my opinion, but I really think that you need to have a menu, and you can't have one thing. Because if you say, I'm going to go out and I'm going to sell DPFs or DOCs or SCRs or anything else like that, you're missing 75% of the whole equation. And so a cleaning facility is actually adept at doing this kind of business, because both Cummins and Detroit Diesel both advertise about a 40% core rejection rate. Meaning that when a product comes into a dealership at Detroit or any Cummins related engine, 40% of those cores are rejected. And that rejection comes with a core charge. So you have a reman unit that is been cleaned, and we don't know how many times. And every time you clean, there's some PGM that comes out of the material. And the reason we know that is that people buy the ash from the cleaners. Like, there's value in that. So anytime there's a business, then you understand there's value in something. So that being said, if I'm a fleet and I'm buying an OEM reman unit, I don't really know what I'm getting. And so the regenerative capability of the DPF and the DOC depend heavily on the platinum, as well as one other thing that we might talk about in a little minute. But yeah, so essentially all that stuff comes into play.
So when you think about, I'm a parts salesperson, I'm out there, I want to have these kinds of conversations with my repair shops, with my fleets that have their own mechanics. And I want to talk about that larger, the 75%. It's not just coming in with products, feature and benefits. Hey, our DPF or our, DOC is built this way. That's 25% of the conversation. Like, what's the best way to begin initiating that conversation with a vocational fleet, let's say, that has 30 pieces of equipment and they do construction work? And I'm a parts sales guy. I want to go in and say, look, I just signed up with Scott. I've now a distributor for him. I'm selling his product. How do I go in and initiate that conversation? What's the first thing I need to say?
Well, the first thing that you really need to understand, and this is what I tell all of my customers, is that this is not a features and benefits product, right? There's no air conditioning or leather seats in this, right? 409 is 409, platinum is platinum, cordiorite is cordiorite, or whatever substrate most people are using. So it's not really about the product. I mean, to the fleet, they want to know that it fits and it works. That's it, right? So then price becomes relevant, and it shouldn't be. And I've heard previous podcasts from you talking about this very topic. So really what it comes down to is, can that salesperson be a system analyst? Can they be a system consultant? Because that's where the problems cause, right? So if I'm blowing a EGR cooler out, and I'm throwing coolant down the exhaust stream, you've just poisoned your system. So what if I can help you prevent that from happening, right? Spend less upfront so your cost per mile is lower over time. And really that comes into play. And so really what our goal is, and what my sales team, what I charge my sales team with, is to become good advisors and help them buy less. It sounds counterintuitive, but it's not. Like, when you have to, buy them from us, right?
Yeah.
But seriously, we can help you prevent that. And there's technologies that most fleets, I'm so blown away. I make a ton of fleet calls every time I travel. They don't even know what a smoke machine is.
I don't know what a smoke machine is. What is it?
We should talk about it then.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah. So there's a company that I really like called Redline Detection, and they're based out of California. I have no association with them. This is completely, without any kind of, like I said, association. But you plug the tailpipe.
So you're not like, click the affiliate link here?
Nope, none of that. I don't get any commission on the deal, but I believe strongly in their product.
Okay.
I really do. And so if you plug the tailpipe and you plug the intake with these bladders, you inflate them with shop air. And then on the intake, there's another line that you hook to this machine, and it basically vaporizes mineral oil. It is approved by every OEM. So go down the list. They all approve it. Almost every OES dealer service center has one of these machines, the same brand, in every one of their shops. That's Navistar, Pack, that's everybody, right? And so what happens is, we need to back up a little bit and talk about the ideal gas law. So I'm a big fan of physics. I'm a recovering engineer, let's say. So the ideal gas law says that the product of pressure and volume is related to temperature. There's some other constants in there, the number of moles and an ideal gas constant, but you can get rid of the constants. We're talking about an equation where we change values and affect something else. And our goal is to get the temperature up, right? So pressure times volume equals temperature. And if I have leaks in my system, volume goes down because it's leaking. Therefore, the engine goes into high idle, the pressure increases, but it's blowing out essentially exhaust gases before the after treatment system everywhere. You're dosing diesel, excuse me, down onto the DOC. and just things aren't working the way they're supposed to do. So you have extended regeneration times. And so the smoke machine, you throw it on, it takes like literally a minute to do. And then you look at every clamping gasket from the exhaust manifold down the line. You look at the EGR cooler, you look at everything, you look at the turbo, and then you look at every connection point on down the line, including sensors. And then you see this like smoke coming out, and you're like, there's a problem. And so to answer your bigger question is really, if we can provide that service to the fleets through our distribution network, they can help those fleets solve their problems before they happen.
That makes a lot of sense. So when we shift gears to the independent repair shop, if the dealer's got like 90% market share, I'm buying my products through a local aftermarket distributor. How do I get more market share in my local area that I service?
You really have to become a systems expert. And you have to understand that the cost involved in these products are high. Again, we've already discussed that they're the biggest expense a fleet can face. And so I've worked with so many outside part salespeople that will walk over a DPF and a DOC to sell a drum.
Yeah.
They're not it's the people that we're looking for in terms of our business relationship with our distributors, is the people that are thinking like, okay, how can I help them better? How can I better my relationship with this people that I service all the time, that I see every week? What can I add value with? And really the value is not so much the DPF and the DOC and the SCR, it's everything upstream of that to the exhaust manifold, so that I can prevent you from spending all that money. It sounds counterintuitive, but that other stuff's going to happen anyway over time. So I add value. My guys add value that way.
Then when they need the product, they buy it from you.
Yeah.
So as the independent repair shop owner, it really comes down to becoming more proficient in diagnosing and preventative maintenance for the fleets that you service. And that goes in connection with working with a distributor that is providing you with that value. Now you become more valuable to the local marketplace, and you're going to grow your business.
Absolutely. It's that simple.
So let's talk about your company a little bit. We always like to leave that to the end. We want to try to give as much value up front as possible. What makes your company different? Why should people buy your products?
Well, when you're talking about aftertreatment in the aftermarket specifically, there's an oligopoly. There's only 4 or 5 players that are really of significance. And I'm not downplaying the others, but just if you're out there in the market, what you see on the floor next to a truck is 4 or 5 different companies. So we all have different philosophies, and they're very good companies out there. I'm not disparaging anyone. What we do that's different is that we take a very specific approach. So there's a concept that very few businesses know why they do what they do. They know how they do it, and they know what they do, but very few know why. And so that's where we initially started with, why do we want to do this? And my entire team, including our CEO and all the C-level guys, what we came down to is we really want long-term relationships. So this becomes a very commercial thing, where I'm not necessarily talking about features and benefits about our product. Does it fit? Will it work? That kind of thing. Is it good enough? Yes. Okay. So outside of that, what do you do? Because everything else becomes price after that. And that's a dangerous game. It puts companies out of business. Mm-hmm. And so we look for people who believe what we believe. And it's that simple. I don't want to sound like trite, but.
Are you familiar with Simon Sinek?
Very familiar.
Okay, good.
Read every one of his, yeah.
Yeah, he's great. If you want to know your why, start consuming Simon Sinek's content, and you will get there.
I fully admit, I will tell you that I had a marketing partner that changed my career.
Yeah,
changed my life in a lot of ways. And I'm going to forward this to her so she can watch it and hear me say it.
Awesome.
She introduced me to Simon a long time ago, and I fully believe in the concepts that he puts forward. Yeah. And so my personal why is I want to be a catalyst for commerce and conservation so that we can enjoy prosperity together. And everything I do, I filter through that. That is my personal why.
Awesome. Yeah. I have a very wonderful relationship with an author named Michael E. Gerber. He wrote a book called The E-Myth Revisited back in the 80s, and it was republished many times. He's actually authored dozens of books now. And the latest book is Beyond the E-Myth. It's his last installment. He is in his 80s after all, but he talks about how every business needs a dream, they need a vision, they need a purpose, and they need a mission.
Yeah.
When you put those together, it's his way of saying, what's your why? What's your why, and how are you going to build a business to deliver a specific valuable result in the marketplace? And I love his work, and it's so wonderful to be. I interviewed him on my other podcast, Build a Better Business, which is now done. I did 150 interviews, but we got to know each other after that, and we stay in close contact. And it's just wonderful to be able to hear these people talk about something that's so much more valuable than, like we say, going back to things like, pedestrian things like products, features, and benefits, and price. You got to have that overarching reason to do what you do.
You do, absolutely. So if I could kind of close that out with, I told you my personal stuff, but really our company, one of the greatest things about it is our CEO is a serial entrepreneur. He's also a professional race car driver. So like, he's all about performance, right?
What type of cars does he race?
NHRA drag racing.
Wow. Nice.
Yeah. So if you Google his name, well, let's talk about that later. But anyway, but he's really, I think his greatest quality is his passion. Like he's passion for not just the industry. You have to understand that our company deals in oil field, emission flaring, catalyst, as well as stationary power generation, as well as high performance automotive, and heavy duty, was just a natural fold out. We've been doing catalysts and filters for a long time in a lot of different spaces. So 3 years ago, they launched what you and I would consider to be our world, right? The heavy duty truck market. And that's been rolled out in Canada for over 3 years. And so in some ways we're kind of a newcomer to the US market, but we're not, right? We have 20 years of experience in this field, and we have a very lean company in terms of headcount, and we have a very lean company in terms of understanding our why, right? Because then we develop our mission. Well, first our vision, then our mission. And that's all internal communications, right? That's just for the people that work with us and for us. And then after that is our value proposition. And that's all derived from the why. So it's very clear. And what happens when you do that is that you can actually make hard decisions very easily. And so you just filter everything through it. And that's why I'm so passionate about it.
You've been watching HDPR Live. I'm your host, Jamie Irvine. Today, we've been talking with Scott of Global Emissions Systems. And to learn more, you can go to dpfxfit.com. Links will be in the show notes. Scott, thank you for being on HDPR Live today.
It's been an honor, Jamie. Thank you.
You can watch our next video, and don't forget, subscribe to the YouTube channel.